This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. My guest on the podcast today has made a name with his killer Vienna Lagers and amazing West Coast IPAs. Mike Hunsaker, head brewer and co-founder of Grains of Wrath. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Looking forward to picking your brain about brewing some of these beers. Obviously, if anyone who reads Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine saw our IPA issue earlier this year, noticed that Grains of Wrath crushed it straight out with a 99, on that West Coast IPA style. So I want to definitely talk about this evolution of West Coast IPA and, how you put some fine points on it to make, examples of this style that are so interesting and compelling to drinkers today. Before we do that, nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Innovative modular designs and no proprietary parts propel G&D ahead as the premier choice for your glycol chilling needs. Breweries you recognize like Russian River, Ninkasi, Jack's Abbey, Samuel Adams, and more trust G&D to chill the beer you love. Call G&D Chillers to discuss your project today or reach out directly at gdchillers.com. Also, haze for days in your IPAs. Carry BioHaze from BSG adds that perfect, stable, cloudy appearance for your hazy recipe. Made with all natural materials, BioHaze is a free-flowing microgranular powder that binds with protein molecules in beer that form polyphenol protein complexes to produce a cloudy haze. This unique product can be added to final beer to give your beer that famous haze. Find out more about BioHaze at bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact them at 1-800-374-2739. So, Mike, talk to me a little bit about your background in brewing. Now, you've moved from the East Coast through the Midwest out to Portland, worked for a few breweries along the way, and been honing your brewing chops, at every turn. Walk me through, that kind of arc of brewing that got you to where you are today, having co-founded Grains of Wrath and now making the styles of beer that you do.
Sure. Been brewing now for 10 years professionally. And then, obviously the usual 8 years before that at home. Really originally from Chicago, born and raised there for the most part. And during the 08, kind of the big crash, no job. So my parents happened to be living in Virginia Beach, and there happened to be some jobs down there. So I cut bait and went down there to try to reboot. And I was there for about not even a month. I walked into a brewery that had been open for just a few weeks, and kind of worked my way into a brewing gig there. The owner wasn't all that great at brewing. He had a kind of a vision on where he wanted to go, but didn't really have much of the knowledge, as neither did I, to be honest with you. But just kind of grabbed the chance while I had it.
Sure.
It's kind of crazy. And I was there for about a year and a half at what was called Beach Brewing back then. It's got a different name now. And then the other brewer and I departed there after some time. And I had met Matt Cole, who's the one of the founders and the master brewer of Fatheads in Cleveland, when I was at the Great Taste Midwest about 2 years beforehand. We had kind of kept in contact, just texting back and forth once in a while. And I at that time when I left, I needed to work for a brewery that was world class, and I wanted to learn a lot more than what I could have done on my own. So I called up Matt, and he was kind of shocked that I called. I told him I wanted to work for him. I kept remembering him saying the first couple of times, "You want to move to Cleveland?" I'm like, yeah, I went out of Virginia Beach. It was not kind of my style of area, and it was super fledgling like craft beer scene back then. So this was like 2012. And he's like, I've got nothing but a bottling gig on a Mahine. And, and then he said, you're going to walk off the brew house and come here. And I said, yeah, I want to, I'll earn my way in. So he, once again asked me if I really meant about moving to Cleveland. So it's like a small Chicago, actually. I love Cleveland. And he had told me that I'd have to meet his production manager, Chris Altmont. And on my way up, I got a phone call from a longtime brewer in the Chesapeake Bay area, Alan Young, who was running Gordon Biersch at the time, and said, "Hey, I heard you're driving to Cleveland." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, who are you meeting with?" And I said, "Chris Altmont. He's the production manager there." He's like, "Yeah, I hired Chris Altmont years ago for Gordon Biersch." And I was like, "Oh, there's my in," So I drove the 9 hours up there. And Chris was super cool. He was busy, and he said, "Yeah, just have a seat. I'll be right with you." And I happened to throw. I said, "I heard we have a mutual friend." Yeah. And he goes, "Who?" "Alan Young." He just stopped, closed his computer, and he's like, "How do you know Alan Young?" And I was like, "Well, I was working at this brewery here, but Alan would also teach me a lot on the side. I just wanted to get better at what we were doing." And he's like, "Alan Young let you work on his equipment." I said, "Yeah, but you're hired." Jesus, Chris, come on! I just drove 9 hours. I don't think we could have solved that early on. But no, he was cool, and he offered me the job with the promise that I had done some homework, and they had some fermenters on order. Their production facility had only been open for 3-4 months,
right?
And so but they were true to their word, because I told them, I said, "I know you got fermenters on order." I said, "When those come in," I said, "if you promise to bring me into the brewery and onto the cellar and on the deck." And they're like, "Yeah, no problem." I said, "I'll work hard for you on that bottling line." So we did. And 4 months later, they kept their word and put me in there. So that was a big part, big jump in my career. I wanted to work for those guys.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend, my friend Paul here in Fort Collins. Apparently, worked with you at that old brewery, Beach Brewing, or volunteered with you out in Virginia Beach. And he was recounting a story to me. It's like, Mike was the guy that came in with his notebook full of recipes. And if there was a beer that we wanted to try, we were thinking we needed a new beer to make. It was Mike's recipe book that the beers came from. And he's like, of all the people I know, like Mike was the guy that was focused on how to make the beers and what beers that he wanted to make. And thought it was an interesting kind of insight to see that it's something that you've been highly focused on. But even though that has been your focus, you're not afraid. You weren't afraid to work up from the bottom and find your way in.
Well, if you want it, you got, you can't imagine they're just going to walk in and take someone else's spot. You got to earn it. So, I was. Back to Paul, he volunteered there for a little bit, and then he moved over to another brewery there in town, Smart Mouth, I believe.
Okay.
And who had just opened up. And it was one of those that, I knew that this is the place that I wanted to go. I had their beers before. They weren't
Fatheads, right?
Fatheads, yeah, in Cleveland. Yeah. And Matt, is one of the best brewers in the country. As his beers and obviously the awards show, and makes a wide variety, not just IPA. It's been, and I wanted to learn from someone who can do, be multiple styles and do them in such a high quality manner.
Sure.
So basically I kind of just clawed my way in there and started working. And about a year and a half in, they had decided to partner up with some folks out in Portland and open a brew pub. So I know he had offered the job to an old friend of his at first, but he was not wanting to leave the San Francisco area, Arnie at Marin. And so I, which by the way, every time I see Arnie, I thank him for passing. I do.
Sure.
So he, so and he was kind of just, at the pub on the brew house one day, and he's just kind of up there, and he's kind of, I can see him like, what's wrong? And he's like, I don't know what to do about this Brewer thing out in Portland. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, my buddy's not going to take it. And he goes, I don't know what to do. And he's like, you just got here like a year and a half ago. And I was like, yeah. So I said, I've moved, a third of the way across the country. What's 2/3 more? And he's kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit. And he's like, and the way I sold it to him was, I said, hey, I get it. You can find brewers out there, but who knows what Fathead's beer tastes like more than one of your own brewers? And, and what you expect and what our processes are, and someone that you can trust out there. This is 2,200 miles away. And, we had some beers, and he said, yeah, that's probably a really good idea. Let's do that. So, the partners, partners from here, flew out to meet me in Cleveland, and I had, proceeded to have the worst interview of my entire life. It was one of those that, you want it so bad, and you're just crushing it. Yeah. And not in a good way, crushing it. And so, they were kind of looking at each other like, this is the guy you want, and, so they went on to interview a few other people, but luckily for me, Matt stood up and said, hey, that was an interview. You interviewed him after a 12-hour day on a bench table, out back after he just got off shift. And they said, fly him to Portland by mistake, a couple whiskeys, and talk to him. And I was lucky enough that they did that and offered me the job for Portland. So, it's been the greatest move of my career. What better place to prove yourself than Portland and the West Coast?
For sure.
So
now, going right into the heart of it, in such a strong beer city with so much tradition around brewing and so many high quality brewers, it's quite a place to try to prove yourself.
Yeah, it was kind of daunting, but at the same time, you got to kind of trust what you're doing. And so when we got there, all the brewers were amazingly friendly and welcoming. A lot of the press, not so much. Well, and even the locals. I mean, I get it now that I've been here for 6 years.
Sure.
I get it. They're very protective of their own, and I remember one of the writers said, "What does Ohio know about beer?" It was said we were colonizing, we were a chain. I'm like, this is the second brew pub. It's more like a link, And so, it was one of those.
Well, it was up to you to prove them wrong,
yeah,
right?
You know what? You take that chip and you put it on your shoulder and you get to work.
Yeah.
I told my guys, I had brought Owen Lamb with me out there, who I worked with at Fatheads, and he's actually with me now at Grains of Wrath as well. It's one of those that I told everybody to keep your mouth shut. No matter what they say, keep your mouth shut, do what we do, and we'll get there. And shortly after that, it was I'll give it to a lot of the writers. They actually kind of said, hey, welcome to Portland. This is, you guys belong here.
They begrudgingly.
Oh, it was very much
you.
so. You know how many times I heard from also customers, we wanted to hate you. And but my next thing I would say is, but, and they're like, everything's great. Like, we like it. I'm like, good, that's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
There's no grudges. I get it. Especially now I get it. They were not trying to have it at first, and plus the logo and all that wasn't exactly Portland friendly.
Sure. Sure.
Very Midwest. So, but yeah, it was, I think it was forgiven. I mean, within the first, and then, they respect a lot out here, coming up big in awards because they like to be proud of their breweries out here. So
sure.
First beer I ever entered in GABF, won a gold medal in the rye I run with a rye Maibach. And from then on, it just snowballed. And so I was very lucky, and people were very, very cool. We worked very hard to be, part of the fabric of Portland. Yeah.
For sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about Grains of Wrath then, and then get into talking about IPAs. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Mountain Rose Herbs, purveyors of the highest quality organic herbs, spices, and teas. Whether you want to add depth to your next golden triple with classic notes of cinnamon, pepper, and clove, or artfully layer exotic, zesty grains of paradise into a perfect ale, adding botanicals to your brewing is an easy way to customize a delicious flavor profile. Mountain Rose Herbs has been providing organic herbs and spices to chefs, herbalists, and dedicated brewers for more than 3 decades. Learn more at mountainroseherbs.com and get 10% off your first order with the code CRAFTBEER10. That's craft beer and the number 10. Also, Yakima Valley Hops is your hop source, whether you're brewing 5 gallons or 5 barrels. Get all the hops you want when you want them. They source the highest quality hops from the Yakima Valley and premium growing regions around the world so that you have access to the largest hop portfolio possible. Even the hard-to-find varieties like Citra, Nelson Sauvin, and Galaxy. Homebrewers visit YakimaValleyHops.com, and wholesale accounts find them at SpotHops.com. So talk to me about the formation of Grains of Wrath, and then let's dive into some IPA talk, because life is short, and we got to get down to...
Well, I had lived across the river in Washington. So those who don't know, Portland and Washington share a border with the Columbia River. And so I lived in Washington. It was at that time a little cheaper to live over there, being that I have 2 St. Bernards, and it was cheaper to live. So I would make that drive every day. But there was a beer bar down the street called Caps and Taps that my now partner Brendan Greenan owned, and so that was kind of my little bar, my little craft beer bar. Been there for a while, became friends, and we always we started toying with the idea. What about this area could really use something, and what guy doesn't really dream of, having his own spot.
Sure.
So we kind of kept talking about it, and it was, we had, brought the idea to, 2 of the, 2 business owners down the street, Sean Parker and Brendan Ford, and said, hey, how about, can we get some startup money, you get in on this early. And they actually kind of just said, hey, why don't we just partner up and just do the whole thing? And so we were off to the races at that point. And, it's kind of a, I was heavily influenced, being from Chicago, heavily influenced by the crew over at 3 Floyds, and, they're friends to this day. And, so that kind of edge, just that attitude, make great beer and whatever else, let it fall where it may. So
sure.
So
make it cool, make people, it doesn't need to be this one thing for everybody, but you want the people who get it to really love it.
For sure. I mean, my biggest thing is, and we're very lucky that our customers, are very supportive of our brand, but at the same time, you want to make beers also of the quality that your peers respect you. And, I want to be, my kind of idea of that kind of success in this area, especially in this area, is, if someone's coming to Portland and you can name 4 breweries, I want to be on that list. Where Brewers would tell other people to go. And that's what drives us to make that kind of beer. And so when we opened this spot, we got this beautiful JV Northwest system. They're now gone. Now there's something else, but beautiful system. It's a 10-barrel, 3-vessel steam system with 10, 20-barrel fermenters. Wanted to be able to do, we got the 3-vessel just so we can be able to do raises and do, pseudo decoction and that sort of thing for classic styles as well as IPA. And then, just got it running after about a year, took a little bit over a year to get to get her open, but it's well worth it.
So let's talk about formulating a beer plan. I love that, while obviously IPAs are a staple for you, even under Grains of Wrath, you've won medals, I think, back-to-back in the Vienna Lager category, and, also, have a deep love of those classic styles. But, so as you're conceiving of this idea, of a plan for beer for Grains of Wrath, talk to me about that kind of vision process.
I think you have to be obviously financially responsible as well as want to be true to yourself.
Right.
So IPA is something I kind of built my reputation on, as first and foremost at Fatheads
makes a few of those.
Yeah, they make a few of those. Yeah. And so I was very lucky to be able to see the recipe formulation process, the thoughts, behind certain malts, maltsters, everything, how you really just, completely construct a beer from those guys, and then kind of took that and then kind of made my own version of that. mine is much more as far as IPAs go. So you got to come out of the gate with IPAs. Just you're in
Sure.
Portland. There is everyone's coming around to lagers now in the last couple of years, which is great. But when Owen and I sat down and said, all right, what do we see us doing and being? And IPAs pay the bills and everything else, but one of the other things we were very, very passionate about was make lager, and make some of the best lager we can in this area. And we really, really kind of put our nose to the grindstone and between water profiles, just quality of ingredients, patience. One thing that a lot of places, they're looking to make that buck first, and I think that's our mentality. Is it's ready when it's ready. We don't get told by sales or distributors what happens. He and I call the shots on when that happens. I mean, lagers are minimum 6 weeks. There's no question. Sometimes longer. If we have time. When it's ready, it's ready. So, first thing was to kind of start. You grab the IPA concept first. And kind of go with what what you're solid at. We made good lagers at Fatheads. I thought, I always wanted to, step that game up a lot. So that became really important to us. And I think that's, now people are really starting to take notice of the lager game as well as the IPA. But besides Fatheads, honestly, my biggest influences in IPA were more like SoCal IPA.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, huge. Alpine. When I was living in Virginia Beach, someone shipped me out some Alpine before the Green Flash
Yeah.
debacle. And it was one of those where you poured it and you were just like, Jesus. I mean, Nelson and Duet and Pure Hoppiness and all of that. And Pizza Port, all those guys like that made this beautiful malt backbone, but being super light. Make it lean, but still be this nice platform to hold those hops and make it bitter and beautiful. And those were my biggest influences. Like we're definitely like San Diego, especially San Diego. Area.
Let's dive into it. Let's talk about that. So, from that kind of basis, how do you start building as delving into the Mike Hunsaker mind of brewing? As you're thinking about how to build a base for these hops, what does malt look like for you in your West Coast IPAs? Is there a difference between them? Obviously, you make a number of different quote unquote West Coast style IPAs. Do you vary malt bases in those?
Sure.
Are there some specific parameters that you're playing with that you tweak based on other flavors that are working on in those beers?
Well, that's kind of exactly. Yeah, you just hit it. I mean, obviously it's Pilsner malt forward.
Okay.
But yeah, I think
Pilsner not two row.
Not two row. Actually,
Okay.
I use mine. I use RAR Premium Pils, which is a 2-row hybrid, really, but it's more of a Pilsner malt. I got turned on to that actually by Tyler Brown at Barley Browns, so I always thank Tyler for that. But then you can throw a little 2-row in just to give it a little more depth in different beers. What the ratios look like depends on the beer and what we're looking for as far as starting gravity, finishing gravity, the hops that we're using with it. Does this need a little more malt to kind of hold it? Are the oils proper for the malt characteristics? And then we'll sprinkle in everything from I'm a big fan of like fireman products, so I'll sprinkle in some Munich or some Vienna malt.
Right.
I went away from what the Midwest. So I really believed before the whole haze craze on the East, it was there was very different sections of the country and what kind of malts they used. East Coast, you think of like Dogfish, and it's very now considered more English style in my opinion. It's an American English style. It's heavy crystal malt. You go to the Midwest and like Fatheads, and it's got crystal malt. It's not as heavy. They don't use the darker crystals, but it's still a foundation part of that malt bill. And with my influence, there's pretty much, I think there's one beer that might have like 15 pounds of crystal 15 in it, just for a little color and a little bit of just oomph. besides that, I try to keep those malts clean, just background, all
Yeah.
background.
Yeah. So, I'm curious about that. Like, what would be, as you're thinking about a design, what would be a feature of the beer that might lead you to blend in some Munich and Vienna malt? And when you're keeping it in the background, what do those percentages typically look like?
When you start looking at the hop profile
Yeah.
of where you're going to go with those, what are the oil contents, how big are they? Beers like I've got a beer called Overkill, which at first was Galaxy. I've moved to Vic Secret just because it's the poor man's Galaxy and actually available.
Yeah.
So, but those, New Zealand, Australian, and some of the, depending on the American hops you get, the oil content, those big oily hops, I think they need something that's not going to just plow over the base malt. You're going to have to throw some, Dystopia. I don't hide anything. Dystopia or Overkill has, Big Secret, Mosaic, Citra, and the lots we have are very oily. So I'll use a touch of crystal, but I'll use like Munich 2,
Yeah.
and it's just nothing big, but just enough to set a
Right.
platform for those oils to sit. So it's not like you are just literally, so it's not just like an oil slick coming across, and just dominates. You got to have some semblance of balance to it.
Do you have any kind of specific strategies around, where you dial, in order to kind of avoid some of that caramel crystal overkill that defined
Yeah, you got to keep
IPAs
those
10 or 15 years
percentages
ago?
super low. I mean, I almost considered Munich too, a caramel malt, but
Yeah.
just without the oxidative flavor quality that it
Right.
has. You know what I mean? Kind of papery almost. If you go high enough, like 60,
Yeah.
that's old school, and they used to love it, but no. Keep it low. You
Yeah.
can develop flavor profiles that are going to mimic depth of a crystal malt, or just by using other malts together. Whether it be Vienna, whether it be Munich, or Munich and Vienna.
Yeah.
I also use one called Carablonde from Castle and or Chateau, and it's like an 8 Lovibond crystal malt. Gives a little malt sweetness, but keeps the color light, and it doesn't
Right.
start blending over into that. So like I said, I like keeping everything pretty light on the color, and then the percentages. I mean, no more than 15%.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 on a certain beer. I've got a beer that has like 20% Vienna malt, and then that's about it. And then it goes back to I use a little bit of a wheat flake, just to give it body.
Yeah.
Again, another little platform to think of during the malt structural process.
Let's talk a little bit about hops. Now again, you make a lot of different IPAs because it's especially with a kind of a brew pub focus. You are always and constantly keeping things interesting for people, that come and drink there with you. So, obviously hops become a very broad subject from there. Are there, some kind of cores that you find yourself coming back to, and then once we move through that, I'd love to talk about how you've evolved in timing and additions and late additions and then dry hopping.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have the Holy Trinity: Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you can put that in any beer and make it worse. That's for sure.
Right.
Jason Peralt was down brewing with me, from Peralt Farms, and he is
Right.
half of the Simcoe. He's the one who developed Mosaic, Citra, and he was drinking Dystopia. And he's like, "What hops are in this?" I said, "It's the Trinity." And he's like, "The Holy Trinity." He's like, "Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic." He kind of sat back, and I love that guy because he's so humble, and sometimes it almost escapes the fact. And I looked at him, I said, "You don't realize you've kind of developed the American IPA palate with those hops alone." And he kind of thought about it. He's like, "Wow, never looked at it that way." I'm like, "Well, we do." So I
Yeah.
mean, we
Yeah.
use a lot of those. I'm finally getting my hands on some Strata this year, which has been, one of the new sexies. Um, Amarillo is always a big part of my program. We get some really great Amarillos from Crosby Hop Farm in Oregon here.
Right.
Make like the old school Amarillos, they're really nice. I kind of use those as a base, but where I've really kind of opened things up more is New Zealand. Everyone loves the big oily, dank hops from Australia, but the dank yet refined fruit flavors and compounds you get out of that New Zealand hop varietal group is just fantastic. And again, being influenced by Alpine, Nelson's a big part of my program. One of my favorite hops after that, probably from that group, is by far Waimea. I'm a huge fan of that. It's like orange marmalade. We had gotten, unfortunately, with CBC came around. Crosby had asked us to be part of. They asked if certain brewers to use hops from certain farms that they work with. We got paired with Freestyle Hop Farms in New Zealand.
Oh, poor you.
Oh, guys murder it. They've taken the old school kind of mentality of, we'll harvest it when we harvest it, which is why you can get Nelson that are just incredible and some that are just feet. And right. they really taken the new school approach as to windows and when the oils and the flavor, the compounds are right. And so that's where Crosby actually works with them. And so we got paired with them, and they said, we want to showcase like one predominant hop. And I was like, how about Waimea? Everyone knows Nelson already. And they were all about it. So they shipped me up some of the new harvest, and it was just incredible. And then, of course, CBC got put on hold, and COVID hit, and the whole thing. We were supposed to actually 2 weeks after, when the shutdown happened, 2 weeks later, we were supposed to be going down for harvest.
Yeah.
With those folks, and that trip obviously got squashed. I'm a big New Zealand fan. Rakau is another big one I like. Motueka's okay. I know people are really into it. I'm on the fence about it, but
right.
But New Zealand hops are a cool way to blend with American hops. They just sing.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some of those blends. Are there some favorite combinations that you find? I always love that little insight where folks talk about the specific combinations and some of the elements and the more common hops that help pop some of these other elements, or vice versa, from some of those new school and Southern Hemisphere hops.
Sure. I mean, you know what? I think it's got to look at basic flavor profiles that you get from each one of these, and kind of, I don't know, either see it or you don't kind of idea of, all right, this big citrus, tangerine, pineapple. This would go really well with like that dank grape of, say, Nelson, or orange from the Waimea. And are those going to play well together? Yeah, they play well together. But what's going to tie them in together and not just be just a citrus, fruity citrus bomb? All right, well, what hops do we have right now that pull in that little bit of dankness, that whether it be the cattiness of Simcoe, or you get those mid-harvest mosaics that have a little bit of that OG kind of character to it, that, in my opinion, in the right amounts, pop fruit flavors and tropical notes. You can have all that dank, really OG kind of thing, but that, I think, the way I construct my beers, that kind of thing is what elevates those other non-dank, fruity, high tropical, profile hops.
And I mean, it's a little bit of there's a commonality, I think, among, I don't want to call it like a common palate, but that bit of dank weediness, that little bit of diesel, that cannabis kind of note to it.
Sure.
Certainly makes those Oregon in general, has that flavor to it, and I always find it interesting when I go there. Like, and it's so funny that whether you're talking about West Coast IPAs or hazy IPAs or anything else, like it's just the general palate kind of shifts that way, and everyone likes that in their beers, and so I find it to be a beautiful thing because I love regional variety and I love that kind of specialization. I think this idea of national and international homogenization of styles is a negative thing that we should work against, and that we should celebrate this kind of regional
Oh,
tastes and palates and specialties. And I love going to Oregon and drinking these fresh, danky, weedy, but also citrusy kinds of beers. Um, Joe and I were actually drinking an Oregon IPA last night and remarking on that same kind of thing. It is this, um, you know, there's this commonality with certain weed strains, that new school
very
weed
much so.
strains, like these Mandarin varying strains, like where they are pulling in citrus character into the weed. And so even the cannabis world is doing the same thing that the
Oh, for
beer
sure.
world is doing, trying to pull in these other, mix these kind of citrus and dank, characters together.
Yeah, what are the
And
flavor compounds people are used to and really enjoy?
right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can do that, that's But regionality is very much. I love it because the hops. What we're making in Portland area, what they're making in San Diego, what Pine House and those guys are doing in Austin, what Joe and those guys are killing it there. Albuquerque, another forgotten
Absolutely.
IPA capital.
Then
Those
also
guys,
with like La Cumbre and Bosque and some of the
Boxing Bear and
right.
Canteen and Marble. I mean, those, that's a sick little spot.
For sure.
Um,
And they all have that kind of, those beers taste like the desert Southwest, like there's a dusty character to them, you know, uh,
Whether it's water profile as
right.
well as the hops that, the combinations they're using, it's very localized. Which is why I really enjoy getting beers from outside of this area,
Right.
because it shows me, because like San Diego has really become way into the super OG weedy, like almost too much for me
Yeah.
on certain beers. Like it was like the last day harvest of Mosaic, so it's just kind of like a homeless bum. It's like BO and weed. If that makes any sense whatsoever. But and that's borderline for me on some of those because
Yeah.
it's like so much. It's like I wish they had a little more of this, but who am I to argue with their success down there? And and plus
For
all
sure.
most of my friends. So
Let's talk about some timing on hops before we do that. Abe Beverage Equipment is your trusted source for complete brewing and packaging solutions. Whether you're just starting out or looking to expand, Abe offers brew houses from 3 to 60 barrels and canning lines from 15 to 90 cans per minute. Call Abe Beverage Equipment at 402-475-BEER or visit abeequipment.com to learn more. Located in Lincoln, Nebraska, Abe is your trusted source for your brewery equipment. Visit abeequipment.com for complete brewery solutions. And if you enjoy this podcast and want to support our mission to bring you valuable insights from the world's best brewing minds, Craft Beer and Brewing's all access subscriptions are the way to do it. Get a year of the print and digital editions of the magazine, plus access to our library of video courses, a special deep dive email, and more. Go to beerandbrewing.com and click on the subscribe button to join now. So, Mike, as you're using all of these, interesting hops combinations, how over the last decade have your timings on hops additions, changed? I imagine things have shifted more towards whirlpool and late hopping. But I'd love to hear it in your words how you've kind of followed the way things have moved to produce kind
sure.
of softer approaches to bitterness
Um,
without losing that bitterness.
I I came from a program, that is bitter forward, you know, um,
Sure.
and so is like a lot of the SoCal stuff. It definitely has that not abrasive but nice sharp bitterness finish. Those are the beers I'd like to make. So it's really kind of developed a little bit over time. I've always taken the approach that Matt Cole taught me, which is you layer them in. It's not just bookending anymore. You're going to bomb the kettle, make no mistake, but you need to have a little bit of that layered in kind of process. I've gone to hop extract for bittering.
Yeah.
It is, I love it. Besides just giving a little yield, it's very consistent, predictable, which is what I want in that first bittering edition.
Right.
You know, I know I'm going to get out of that every single time. And then from there, you know, I've always gone with it fluctuates depending on the beer and how much of a water up we do at the end of the brew. You know, whether it be a 30-minute edition or a 20-minute edition. Usually I kind of fall within that range, depending, again, on the size of the beer and the water up additions, just to make sure that the bitterness is proper. And by that side, I mean, like, you know, the original gravity. And then, you know, I like to have like a 5-minute edition beforehand, before the whirlpool. It turns out to be kind of similar to like almost a 10-minute edition now, because when we start whirlpool, you know, we water up with cold water to start knocking the temp down, and then I have this inline heat exchanger for my whirlpool, because I don't have a separate whirlpool.
Okay.
So I can whirlpool and knock temp down to 180 before I'm pitching. So it acts more of a 10-minute edition in that way, because it has that time as it, you know, the temperature is dropping to kind of pull some ISO out of it. So, and then when at 180 is when we start pitching our whirlpool hops now. And then of course you just, you know, and you hit that usually at the, you know, the whirlpool is about, you know, 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds a barrel in the whirlpool.
Yeah.
1.5 pounds a barrel. So yeah, I mean, and all in, probably you're talking 3 pounds a barrel, 2.5 pounds a barrel on the hot side.
On the hot side. Let's talk about dry hopping then. What's that look like for you? Are you doing it old school style? Well, I shouldn't say old school style, but you know, dropping yeast before you dry hop, or you?
Yeah, we do, because I want to, you know, I'm harvesting off of that too.
Of course, right.
So you know, once we get to terminal, we usually will harvest and drop. The second day, we'll drop and then dry hop. So usually we're getting, you know, good 75, 80% of the yeast out of that. You know, you can't get anything off the sides, obviously, but, you know, and nowadays with the way that the hops have been, you know, kilned in this, you know, hop creep or whatever, you know, depending on what you want to call it, you know, that kilning at such low temperatures now to save all the oils is just not denaturing all those enzymes. So you're going to get hop creep, you know, and I remember, had to be 4 or 5 years ago, Jeff Irway and I, Jeff from La Cumbre, were at CBC, and we both kind of stood up at the same time at this hop panel and we're asking, is anyone noticing like this hop butter? You know, and we, you know, I don't think any one of us really knew or kind of believed quite yet it was diacetyl. You know, it was always kind of this weird, you know,
how could that
thing
be
that was going on.
Re-entering the,
Yeah, right. And so, you know, now fast forward and all the research that's been done and things that brewers talking to each other, you know, my IPAs are not fast. You know, I'm 24-day IPAs.
Yeah.
Because we're watching these spikes happen, you know, day 4 of dry hop. You know, we'll dry hop. We usually start dropping, you know, do about 4 days of dry hop. And then, but we're seeing these spikes that happen about day 4, day 5. And then they start declining, and they're usually gone around day 8. You know, so it's definitely elongating the amount of the brewing process without adding any of these new, you know, there's some new stuff out there you can add that will denature the precursors for diacetyl, which we're thinking about playing with a little bit. And but it's that now you got to wait your time. You know, you have a choice. You want big oils and flavor, or and you know, have to wait for the creep, or do you want to have it go fast? I'd rather have the oils and wait.
So now, you know, how do you work that into your overall recipe design, knowing that that's going to happen? Because clearly, I mean, you know, that can, you know, that's going to produce, you know, it's going to attenuate a little bit further than what your intended, you know, final gravity was, or terminal gravity. And, you know, and so how have you adjusted recipes to kind of accommodate that? You know, you certainly don't want these to be too dry, because then you're going to have these crazy bitter beers that are going to feel unsupported.
Right. We've actually had to, so the big thing every year when the new harvest comes in and you start getting all your new hops is find out who the culprits are. So every year it changes
Right,
because,
right.
you know, all your hops are coming from different farms, different kilning temperatures. So like last year it was our Amarillos and our Citrus.
Yeah.
This year it's my Mosaics and Simcoe.
Huh.
So I've had to, on the fly, you start having to mash higher. So you have a little bit higher finishing gravity or, you know, terminal gravity before dry hop, because we're seeing on some of these beers over a point of drop
Wow.
in gravity. So we're having to have these things finish at like 3, so they don't drop, you know, so they
So
stay
they're still
around 2.
finish it too. Right, right.
Right. I mean, you know, and it's that kind of fun, really. I mean, it's part of the job, and
Sure.
our jobs don't suck. So really, it's honestly, if
Right.
anyone complains, they need to get out. And it's that fun thing you got to find out every year. Like, all right, new harvest is coming in. Let's see where these are dropping. So it can take a month or so to kind of figure out. Okay, it's the citrus, or it's
Right.
going to be this and this. So, and then you make adjustments to that same beer just by even again trying to have your beers finish either higher or around where they were. You know, so.
So I can expect in November or so, when the new crop comes out, to be drinking extra dry IPAs for about a month until.
Well, I don't have the pull to get new hops in November.
Okay.
I don't get new hops till January,
Okay,
so you're good. Yeah, I'm a little guy still. So, but no, it's nice. You know, it's always, you know, keeps you on your toes, and it's not that, you know, it's really interesting to watch how this is all developed.
Sure.
And how fast, and you just got to build that into your program that you're going to wait this amount of time, because it's just not going to. I mean,
Yeah.
IPA is now 4 or 5 days later than it ever was in the past few years. So
January is a good time to make that change too. I mean, it's generally a light brewing month,
Yeah.
so yeah.
it is, and you can start getting things out, and people are just, you know, still recovering from all the holidays.
Dry January, doing that.
Yeah,
whole
you know,
thing.
a half a point here and there. You know, people
Yeah,
are gonna forgive for a minute, and then till you fix it.
Do you dry hop in a single stage, multi-stage? Yeah, is there kind of
I'm
a
a
temperature angle to how you do it?
I leave it at fermentation temp, so I'm you
Okay.
know, I'm 67 degrees when we dry hop. I'm usually single stage, just all at
Yeah.
once, and then we set our CO2 to about 90 pounds, and pop and rouse the hops
Yeah.
4 days before and then when you taste it and it needs to go longer, it goes longer.
You drop them in from the top, or do you pump them in, purge and pump them in?
No, we go from the top,
Okay.
old school. You know, we just put the racking arm at like 25 pounds of CO2 coming up, so there's nothing really going down.
Yeah.
And then you know, then we put some head pressure on it after we close up, head pressure on it, and then we slowly bleed it down just in case there's any O2. We've also noticed that you know, I think it's now with the creep and the way things go, even if a little O2 gets in, it's going to be forgivable, because that
Right.
fermentation's happening again, and it's going to grab a little bit of that O2 and clean it up anyways. You know, we haven't had any noticeable, you know, or anything that has jumped out on us as far as that kind of work.
Right.
But yeah, we don't have big enough fermenters yet to have all the fancy stuff.
Yep.
One day.
Yeah. What's the fermentation look like for you? Are you using standard kind of California ale yeast and you know, typical temperatures, or?
Yeah, I'm BSI. I use BSI there in Colorado.
Yeah.
I use their one for that, you know, and we start at 65. We brew twice into a tank, but we do it back-to-back days for yeast health and development. So, you know, again, we don't rush. So back-to-back days, 65 the first day, 66 the second, and then once the morning of that, after that second brew, we go to 67, and that's where she stays until she's done. You know, we use for our lagers, we're using Ondex. We use the Ondex strain, which I love their beers. You know, I do. I love their beers. So I think it was kind of natural. We never used it before anywhere else. I've never used that until I moved over and started Grains of Wrath. So it's been a happy transition.
Well, you just provided the perfect segue for me to start talking to you about lagers.
Yeah.
Talk to me, like, what is it about this Ondex strain of yeast that you love so much? And you know, compared to other lager yeast strains, why do you think it produces better lagers, or at least maybe not better, the lagers that you feel you want to make?
I like it. It's super clean. It's consistent. It you know, ferments fairly low, 52. So So it gives super even ferments. It's super versatile. I mean, we use it everything from our American light lager to our Vienna to our Baltic,
Yeah.
to box. It because Ondex, if you drink their beers at all, they have a wide variety of styles, and they're all really good. And I like
Yeah.
that it's clean, it's neutral. It doesn't leave too much on the table. It doesn't leave any kind of fatty quality to the fermentations. Yeah, it's a workhorse for us. I think I'm only two of us in the Portland area that use it, that I know of. A lot of people using Augustiner and stuff like that
Right.
because, again, workhorse. But just I wanted to set that a little bit different with the Ondex, and it's beautiful, it's clean, gives you what you want. And like I said, I just want the consistency. I know where I'm going to get out of that yeast every time.
So, the history of lager brewing is long and well established. Carving out a territory in that for yourself and being able to win awards in categories of beers that have been made for so long, and with so many brewers that have honed so many techniques and processes around these, is rather interesting and always a kind of significant one. Talk to me a little bit about your design process around your Vienna Lager and how you envisioned a Vienna Lager. Now, when I say this, I mean Vienna Lager. If you consider Sam Adams' Boston Lager, it's probably one of the biggest craft beer styles there is. IPA is probably the biggest, but Vienna Lager is huge. And then and there's some major players in that space between Sam Adams and Devil's Backbone and others that are just making some consistently great and award-winning and high selling Vienna lagers. But from your perspective, as you were kind of starting to conceive of how you're going to make something that was both classic and true to tradition, but also had a character that might elevate it amongst your consumers, as well as the potential peers and then judges, because the
Sure.
competitions you're entering, they are judged by peers. How do you start formulating that idea for a beer? And talk to me a little bit through your mental process.
Sure. Well, first, being in Virginia, Devil's Backbone, that's their backyard. So they're Vienna
Sure.
Lager, and Jason Oliver's a friend as well. And so that was always one of my favorite. I've always loved that style, and Devil's Backbone always made one that was great. It's while I love American, it's it has its time of year for it. But a Vienna, you can drink that all year long. It gives you malt depth. It gives you this beautiful character if you can choose your malts properly. So I had actually called up Jason one time when I was just starting to build this recipe, and he was like, I like that. I would change this, without giving me exactly the recipe, but kind of giving me the idea of it.
Yeah.
And I brewed it kind of that way the first time, and it was good. I thought it was a little heavier than I wanted it to be. Kind of leaning that, going from a Vienna to this Oktoberfest / Märzen, and these styles that kind of bleed into each other in a lot of ways, depending on what region you are in Germany as well. I wanted mine to be more on the lighter side, color, but all the flavor you can get into it. So I took, I never changed the malts out of it. I changed the percentages out of it, which really lended a huge part of that. Hitting those marks of toasty, a little bit of bready, but being crisp and drinkable, and fireman malts. I mean, everyone's got their thing,
Right.
and that's one of them. I mean, if you look at even like my foam, my popper,
Yeah.
I'm a fireman guy, so I love their malts again. And as with any recipe or anything that you're brewing, whether it be a lager or IPA, use quality ingredients. Your raw materials mean everything. And just the flavor profiles from those raw ingredients that reflect how you feel about it, how you want this beer to taste. So with Vienna, then I tweaked it. I just took one of the malts and kind of flipped the numbers as far as percentages, and we haven't changed it since. It was one of those that then you do a lot of homework on style guidelines, and we are so lucky here to have some beautiful water. It comes right, from Bull Run. The aquifers here are just off the mountains. So they already kind of replicate a lot of what happens in Munich or in Bavaria. Super soft. You don't have to do almost anything to it. I might add just a touch of, to a Pilsner, I might add just a touch of calcium sulfate just to give let the bitterness pop a little bit. But other than that, very little to anything. So it's kind of a combination of everything you can get. But I just wanted that soft breadiness and a tiny bit of toffee without being too much.
Yeah. On the technique side, are there any things that you've discovered over the years of brewing it that or any tweaks that you've had to make that you found made some marked improvements in your lagers?
Oh yeah. I've realized that a lot of our lagers taste better with a little bit higher terminal gravity.
Huh.
Vienna Lager is 3.
Yeah.
It finishes at 3, but it doesn't taste like it's 3. That's the main thing. You have those malts, it's not fat. It's not sweet. It's just, that starts at 12.5. It ends at 3. Each batch we've looked at, that we've sent to GABF has gone from 3.1 to 2.9. So it's right in that area.
Yeah.
And it just, sometimes when we had them drying out a little much, and it was just a little, I don't want to say astringent, but it would definitely just take it out of the realm and not let those malts kind of do what they're supposed to be doing, which is just, creating that body and that flavor.
For sure. No, that's one of Joe's favorite talking points about American approaches to lager and Americans' seeming fixation with the idea of crispy. That is not necessarily how Germans and other Europeans brew their lagers.
Right.
This American fixation on dry and crispy is just not exactly historically accurate or even currently accurate relative to how those are done. And so many American brewers are afraid of that sweetness and seem to shy away from it. But like you say, that magic is in achieving a little bit of it without it appearing that way.
Yeah.
Is that all down to malt selection itself, or is there something else to it?
Well, I think it's malt selection. Again, water profiles play a huge part in that. Yeah, I agree. That whole crispy thing of everything having to finish under 2 or closer to 1. I mean, that's just insane to me. It's just not taking away of what you're trying to do, which is build. I mean, 3 doesn't mean sweet. 3 just means that it has the body left,
right?
And to be that style, but you can still make it crisp. I mean, if you have to change it to make it, if it finishes at 3 and you think that's too fatty, well, is it the malt or is it you not bittering enough to balance it? That's another thing that you want to try to find is that you can leave it heavier so you're getting the malt character you want, but if you add the bitterness properly, you can achieve that balance without it being fat, without it being meaty. And get all the, again, still about all of those flavors of the Vienna malt and the others that you use in that style, especially.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about how you add that bitterness into those beers. Are there regions, origins, or varieties of hops that you always lean to?
Sure.
Are there any techniques that you're using to kind of soften that bitterness and make sure that it's there without it kind of overwhelming and still letting that malt sing?
Yeah, well, again, German style beer or Austrian style beer,
Right.
whatever was bleeding and wherever the boundaries were at that time. But so I still use German hops, German malt. I think those are the baselines of that profile.
Yeah.
And so, but instead of using like Magnum, which is such a high alpha hop to bitter, I use Perla. I use like a 9 alpha, 8.5, 9 alpha. It gives a beautiful bitterness without ever getting astringent or heavy handed. So you don't have to worry about it. You can use smaller amounts and get your bitterness without it actually starting to have to use like minute amounts and you're not sure where it's going to go. And for Vienna Lager, it's just Perla and Tetnang.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of floral, that little floral kick to help really kind of accentuate the aromatics and the flavors of those malts. It just kind of brings everything in balance. So yeah, I don't use anything higher than Perla as far as that goes. And for our Helles Lager, which we also sent in this year, it's all middle fruit, even bittering. So you're bittering with like a 2.5, 3 alpha hop. You just use a little more.
Yeah.
You're not getting so much plant matter. It's fine. But it doesn't allow you to overdo it. And then gives you a little more finesse, I guess you could say, with some of those.
When it comes down to mashing, what does that look like for you? You mentioned earlier you have a 3-vessel system that gives you some flexibility, to do raises and lowers. So I assume with your lagers, you're at least step mashing through this in order to kind of attenuate you want to attenuate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not full on decocting. Or are you?
Well, I really don't have a cereal cooker, so I don't have a second vessel. So when I do a decoction, whether it be like for Hefeweizen, like that's, what I'll basically do is I'll run through all my steps, Frulich, protein, beta, alpha, and then I'll move a certain percentage over to the lauter, and then I'll boil the rest, just so you can get that malleable action and that beautiful flavor out of it, and a little bit of color. But it's one of those things. Like I don't decoct the Vienna, but and everyone can argue if these even the German malts are, whether you really need to step them anymore. I still do it. I think there's some validity to it. So you definitely start with a protein rest. I mean, that's always going to help. And then that one's just 2 steps, and then mash out. So you go protein, then beta, and then sack rest there, and then mash out. Some of the others, I'll use a couple more just to give it a little more body to it. I'll actually do like the Baltic Porter. I do a protein, beta, and an alpha, just to kind of even out those sugar chains. So,
yeah. Well, we're getting on in time here. One of the questions I love to finish the podcast off with is, what does success look like for you? What's the end game for you in Grains of Wrath? Or is Grains of Wrath the end game? I maybe the script isn't written so far, but for you, what does success look like? What are you in this for, and where do you see it going?
It's we're about to open a new spot in Portland, with a small production facility. It's like 15 barrel. It's like 4 30 barrel fermenters right now. So that's our next step right now. I mean, right as I see the future, it's Grains of Wrath. I mean, it's my baby to run as far as the brewing side of things. I've got really good partners that are supportive of what we're doing and doing things the right way. I think success really is I don't measure it in barrelage and monetary value. I do it for the love of what we do here. I'm happy with making a little less money, but having more respect as far as just what we're doing here and how we go about our business, how we go about showing respect to both the industry and the styles that we make, but making it our own. So I just want to be, one of the guys with the brewers that I respect. If we can get a little bigger, great. I've never ever wanted to get anything above 12 to 15,000 barrels at any point in my career. I think the bigger you get in fermenters, the flavor profiles change. It changes. And then you start getting those guys that are punching a card every day to go make your beer instead of wanting to be part of the brand, part of what the culture that you want to build. I want to keep my guys, a small group who love what we're doing, and pay them well, enough to stay around and really kind of just take a lot of pride in it.
Oregon in general as a state has done a really good job with that. And I've been hyper impressed with just how many breweries have built great working environments for the people, taking care of their employees and maintaining, helping them live good lives, through that process. It's not something you see everywhere. There's certainly those issues throughout the brewing. I mean, every industry in America, that's true. There are companies that take care of people, and there are those that don't. But I think in Oregon in particular, there seems to be a fantastic culture. And, I saw it in talking to Tony at Boneyard, same kind of thing. Like, they've built a great environment for the people, and they keep people. It's an interesting dynamic where you see breweries that keep employees for a long time. You can tell they're doing something well.
Yeah. Coming from the East Coast and the Midwest to here, I'll give Portland this is, the brewers and the brewing industry, the real industry, they walk the walk. Everyone looks out for each other. It's a cool culture.
Yeah.
I can't speak for California, but I know a lot of those guys are super tight down there. I know those guys. So.
Yeah.
But being here, man, it's a lot of fun to be a brewer here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Carry Biohaze from BSG adds that perfect, stable, cloudy appearance. Mountain Rose Herbs offers the highest quality organic herbs, spices, and teas. Yakima Valley Hops is your hop source, whether you're brewing 5 gallons or 5 barrels. Abe Beverage Equipment is your trusted source for complete brewing and packaging solutions, and Craft Beer and Brewing's all-access subscriptions are the best way to support this very podcast. Mike Hunsaker, Grains of Wrath, if people want to find out more about your brewery, where do they find you?
Online, that's gowbeer.com. You can look up Grains of Wrath Brewing, it'll take you right there. Instagram, same, at gowbeer. Facebook is all the same. So hopefully we'll have a little more presence on merchandising and stuff going out soon online. People have been asking quite a bit about it, so we'll get it going. But beers found out around here from Seattle to Southern Oregon best we can, at least right now. And then anytime you can always call.
Well, it's fantastic stuff, and our blind panel of judges can certainly confirm it. Delicious, groundbreaking, interesting, and certainly unique and characterful. So you're doing some fantastic work there, Mike. Really enjoyed talking to you about brewing, and can't wait to drink some more of your beer soon.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you soon. Hopefully, I had a couple of collabs right before the COVID fall through that were in Denver. So when I make it out there, let's grab some beer and drink some whiskey.
Come on up and visit me, and we'll drink some beer and drink some bourbon.
We'll do. You got it, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
All right, buddy.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.